Good morning. Thank you and welcome to the Southwest Community Center. We are here for a very important topic. Voter access and the right to vote is the most important thing and the first access to community involvement in their community and in their what happens that affects them and their family. So it is with great pleasure that again I welcome our Mayor, Stephanie Miner, to the Southwest Community Center.
Thank you, Sharon. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for being here this morning. On a beautiful day in Syracuse in August. As many of you know, this is the anniversary month of the Voting Rights Act. And what the Voting Rights Act has, I think, reminded all of us is that we have a country that ensures that we will form a more perfect union when we have more and more people who vote and participate. And unfortunately, what we have seen in recent history is that fewer and fewer people are participating. And as a result, our cities and our country is suffering. And no more so than here in Syracuse in New York State. We are a state that takes pride in the fact that we have led progressive causes in our history as being the progressive state in the Union. But now we find ourselves taking a second place, in fact a third place to other states in the Union when it comes to voting participation. As I said, the right to vote is the most important right given to all Americans. And in 2014, a year with 3 statewide elections and 27 congressional elections, only 28.8% of New York voters participated. And in 2013, an election that was very important to me because I was on the ballot, only 23% of eligible voters participated in the city of Syracuse. Over time, we have gone from making excuses with saying to people, well, people weren't interested in this vote, or they weren't interested in that, or there wasn't enough attention, to unfortunately grudgingly saying that low participation has become the norm. And I'm here and joined by my colleagues in back of me to say that we will no longer accept that norm. That our democracy, our state, our city, our country only works if people have the right to vote and can exercise the franchise. New York State has the 4th lowest voter turnout in the nation. And as we celebrate the Voting Rights Act, we must remember that we have to be vigilant about making the vote eligible and accessible to all New Yorkers. That is why today I have sent a letter to leaders in the state, and I am surrounded by local officials who are joining me in this effort to endorse a series of proposals aimed at improving ballot access. The first step is to pass A 4433, S 3813, a bill that would establish early voting 20 days before an election. There are now 33 other states in our country that have adopted some form of early voting, with the time frame stretching out from 3 to 45 days. When voters have an increased time frame to access the ballot box, they are more inclined to vote and encourage others around them to do the same. The next is to ensure and enable a, quote, no excuse permanent absentee ballot voting. As most of you know, now in order to get an absentee ballot, you have to give the Board of Elections in the state a reason as to why you cannot physically come to the ballot day of the election. We are saying that instead, people should be automatically guaranteed an absentee voting ballot if they want one, and that you shouldn't have to have an excuse, particularly given how busy everyone is nowadays. Finally, and perhaps the biggest change we can make to our system of voting, is to enact universal registration. This allows for every citizen to be automatically registered to vote at the age of 18 unless they choose to opt out. The law would remove another hurdle that disproportionately affects young voters and the underprivileged. This proposal was recently implemented in Oregon, which then added hundreds of thousands of new voters to its rolls. This would help reinvigorate citizens' confidence in government and remind each of us that the more people who participate in government, the stronger our state, our country, and our city becomes. I have sent a letter outlining these proposals and my support of these proposals to Speaker Heastie, Senator Flanagan, Senator Klein, and our local delegation, urging them to support these measures. Finally, I would just like to give you a small story about why I find this so important. Obviously, as someone who is on the ballot, it is very important to me that people exercise the franchise. But also it's important to me as an American that people realize how to vote and where to vote and how important it is that they vote so that their rights, their ideas, and their policies matter. A couple of months ago, I was with my cousin who lives in California and her 6-year-old daughter. And her 6-year-old daughter said to me, "So you're the mayor, how do you get to be mayor?" And I said, "Well, you run for an election. You know, like when your mom takes you into the ballot and she votes for the ballot?" And my niece looked at me, and then I looked at her mother, and I was about to chastise her mother for not bringing her daughter into the voting booth with her. And she said to me, "Steph, I have 3 children under the age of 8. I'm a nurse, I work the night shift, and her husband works during the day. I don't have time to go to the ballot. I vote by mail, and I vote by mail every single time." To me, giving working mothers, working families, and children, and all of the people of our country the ability to vote, making it easy, not hard. Because when we make it easy to vote, we have more participation, we will have a better government, and all people's rights will be represented. And on this anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, I think we can all acknowledge that that is what happened when we passed the Voting Rights Act. It's now time to move in to the 21st century and say that we have to make voting easier for everyone, and we will all be the beneficiaries of that. So I want to thank you all for coming, particularly my colleagues who are both community activists, elected officials, and some people who hope to be elected officials behind me for their support. And with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
If people are, registered to vote, it doesn't mean they're going to go to the polls. I mean, here in Onondaga County this year, the top race is not very competitive. There are not many competitive races. A lot of people just don't go to vote because there's really, there's no excitement about it. There's no, so how do you get past that?
Well, I think, Ellen, what you're seeing is a downward spiral. That the fewer people that vote, the fewer people who are targeted to go out, and the fewer of us who are going to look at them to say, here are our ideas, or here's where we need you to pay attention. We have a system now that is broken. And what is happening is politicians are looking at people who give money and saying to them, I will support your ideas, and then I'll get campaign contributions, and then I'll be able to take those campaign contributions and send mailers to the tiny 13%, for example, in the city of Syracuse who vote. What we need to do is make it easier for people to vote. I can tell you firsthand that whether it's a primary or a general election on that Tuesday, I have to remind myself to vote. I am more in this system than arguably anybody here. And yet, it is difficult. Primary days upstate, the polls don't open till noon. Most people think the polls open at 6. So if you go there at 6:30 to vote and the poll's not open, and you got a busy life, you got kids to feed and make sure that they read and do their homework, and you've got extra hours that you have to work, and the weather's not good, let's change the system. Let's make it easier, just like we have done for all the rest of our lives. We make it easier for people to pay their bills. They can do that at home and on their phones. Let's make it easier for people to vote. And once we do, you'll see more people voting, and then you'll see more people have to ask them for their vote and get better ideas, and more people will be engaged in this process. That's what makes a democracy strong, and our democracy is getting weaker, not stronger, and I'm saying that's because we don't have enough people participating, because in many cases by design or by omission in some cases, we have made it harder for people to vote. Let's end that. That is un-American. Yes, Father.
Right here at the Southwest Center at the polling place, a lot of people move. They move from one house to another, one street or one area, the north to the south. If there was some chance, even if it's just permanent registration in a county maybe they go per day. Say, and you're moving around, okay, just establish that you're already registered, just establish that you live here. It can be done now, granted, but make it easier.
Sure.
People get intimidated when they have to answer a lot of questions and sign things. Just make it easy. We have your name. Just tell us, make sure that you can prove you live here. And that would help particularly at a polling place like this one right here.
And what Father John brings up is something that we see every day. So whether you're young or you're working class, you tend to live at more residents, you move a lot. If you are poor, you have to often count on public transportation to get you from place to place. All of these things are obstacles in getting people to the polls. That's, again, it's un-American. Remove the obstacles. Let people have a permanent absentee if they want, so it gets mailed to them. And if they change their address, it'll get forwarded with the rest of the mail, and we can work through the system that way. But what we are doing now, and we can see by the data, is every year the number of people who come out to vote gets fewer and fewer. So if you can pay your bills on your phone, then you should be able to vote by mail.
Do you get a sense there's any political will in Albany to do this, or are you just spitting in the wind?
Look, I think as with most things, there is a political sense and an urgency among the people in our communities, and that's our role to stand up and say, this is important to us. This is important to the health of our city. This is important to the future of the children that you hear in this community, in this center, important to the people who live around here. And so we're saying to Albany, we're telling you it's important, therefore you make it important. Anybody else? All right, thank you all very much. Have a good day.